Welcome to the show. It's so good to see you, Lynda.
Same here, Kathy.
How are you?
I am good. I'm warm because here well, I guess we're South Central Ontario, it is so hot. I think it's 35 or something Celsius, but with the humidex, it's about 50 degrees.
See, and that's just crazy because as I was saying while we were waiting for the show to start, while we were waiting for me to turn the show to go live, um, that we've actually had snow. Well, not here in Edmonton, but in Calgary, they had snowstorms. So, or just outside. I think it's outside of Calgary. It's like 70 kilometers outside of Calgary, or something along that line. So, um, hello, Paranormal Path. Welcome to the show. We are happy to have you here, and welcome to everybody watching. Thank you so much for being here with us. Make sure that you guys subscribe, and yeah. So, and as we say across the bottom of the screen here, if you have a paranormal topic for the show, contact us. Okay, email us at paranormallyspeaking2@gmail.com, or you can just message us through our our Facebook page or anything like that. So cheers from the UK. Thank you so much. Well, cheers from Canada, because it's just Lynda and I, it looks like today. I'm actually really looking forward to this topic. This sounds like this is going to be a lot of fun, I feel.
Yeah, I agree with you because, anytime there's something that happens in the world, whatever it happens to be, you always hear about people who, sort of narrowly averted some horrible fate. And then you question that and you say, well, why is that so? Like, what happened? Is it intervention? Is it divine intervention? What is it? Yeah, so when you said, Kathy, that we were going to talk about this, I was like jumping up and down. And I don't like to jump up and down. Like, I don't like to jump up and down because it hurts me, frankly, being,
all the bones are shaking.
well, I'm not a youngster anymore.
well, you look beautiful. So there you go.
Sweet.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about saved by a spirit or an angel, some sort of divine intervention, whether or not this was an actual, physical form showing up, or maybe perhaps you just felt like you needed to be diverted for some reason, or you had a feeling of not going. Now, I'm going to actually, put out there that if anyone wants to put their story down below in the comments, we will be happy to read their story out loud as well. If you have a story in regards to being saved by a spirit or perhaps angel, in regards to a particular situation that you almost went through or did go through or whatever, we would love to read the story for you. So first question, I guess. Have you ever had that happen? Have you ever been diverted?
Yes, I actually have. How about you? You too?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, I want to hear about yours. Mine's rather boring, but I want to hear about yours.
Yeah, well, actually, this was interesting. It was something that I remember from my childhood. It actually was for my father. So I found that really interesting because my father was sort of that type that he didn't really believe, in very Catholic. So, didn't really believe in spirits like ghosts or any angels, of course, obviously, but not ghosts and that sort of thing. So I remember we were going on this trip. We were on our way to we used to go to Penticton every year.
Oh,
And so if anybody doesn't know, like the road in BC, some of the roads are very, very, they're a little scary. And when you go along the mountainside, there are some where, you're literally like the cliff is here and your car is here and you're like navigating on the stupidest roads, and it's a little harrowing, right? But we were just going. Now normally we wouldn't stop. Like this would be like a full day type of trip. We might stop for lunch, but for the most part my mom always had like the sandwiches and the snacks, and it was like suck it up, eat it here. You know? Save money in the car, stop at a rest stop, if you have to eat, right?
Yep.
And but this one time we were driving and my dad all of a sudden he just said, we have to stop. We have to stop. We're gonna go for lunch. I have to go for lunch. And my mom was like, what? Like that, because we just like that just didn't happen. Like that just was not part of the trip ever.
Right.
And so, yeah, he was like, no, we got to go for lunch. So we did. We went in, we went for lunch. Well, as it turns out, we get back on the road and there's like a road closure happening up above. It was getting cleared up by that point. Like cars were starting to be able to move through.
Right.
But you ever know, you remember the movie Final Destination?
Yes.
The one with the truck full of logs?
Yep.
That was actually ahead of us.
Oh, jeez.
And so if we had stayed on the road, we don't know like what would have happened, because that whole truck full of logs actually broke loose. And now nobody was hurt. It was not a Final Destination movie or anything like that. But we were very, very close to that truck.
Really?
My dad just said, no, we're pulling over. And we were just little. Like we were little. I was probably about 10 maybe at the time. So it wasn't it was just very unusual, behavior. But he said later, he goes, I just had this feeling. I felt like I was being told to go. Like I had to. Yeah, it was wild. So yeah, let me hear yours.
Mine was a little strange. That was a good story though, Kathy. I like that.
Yeah, especially when you hear it from somebody who's not a huge believer in it, what I mean? Or a huge like paranormal believer, or like I said, one that, I guess you could look at it as like a divine intervention from God, but that would be about where his belief would have like stopped, right? Like there would have been no ghosts or anything like that.
Yeah. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine was a weird one because when I was younger, I was working at Cole's bookstore
Yeah.
downtown Montreal while I was at McGill University. So it was my part-time gig while I was going full-time to McGill. And I would normally work on Thursday evenings because at that time they were open until 11, and Friday evenings until 11. And I'd work
Right.
usually on Saturdays from 9 to 5. So I did my shifts on Thursday and Friday. On Saturday morning, normally I would take the 7 a.m. train to get to downtown Montreal, to Central Station.
Yeah.
But that particular morning, I woke up my usual time, like 6:30 or whatever, because I was always one of those, I'd washed my hair the night before, all my
Yeah.
clothes are laid out, I'm good to go. And I woke up and I had this feeling that I just didn't want to get on the train. And I thought, why do I not feel like I want to get on the train? So I just thought, okay, there's a reason. And then I thought, well, maybe it's because I don't feel well. And I sort of made it up in my head that I didn't feel well and that I
Right.
wasn't going to take that train. I was going to take the later train and like just make it to work. Because normally I would take the 7 o'clock so that I could be there really early and stop and have a coffee and a cafe au lait or whatever. But I didn't do that. I stayed home. I waited, and I was just about to take the later train. The radio was on in the kitchen. My dad always listened to the radio. And there was a bomb that went off at Central Station.
Oh, you know what? You know what's so wild? I was literally there's a is it Netflix that has it, or I literally was seeing something about that like today.
Really?
Yeah, that is so bizarre. I don't remember exactly where I saw it.
Wow.
Because there was one in I believe it was London too.
Okay. It could be.
And so they were kind of like talking about it was just, you know what, I was probably just scrolling YouTube. you know
Maybe.
how you you know how you get caught up in
I do. I do. But
yeah.
yeah, that was a weird day because when I heard that on the radio, I thought, oh my God, so that means that I really shouldn't take the train because Central Station was a complete mess. So I ended
Right.
up taking the bus, taking the metro. And back then we didn't have cell phones or anything. So I remember taking the metro and knowing that I was going to be very late. And when I called work, my boss answered the phone, and when he heard my voice, he knew that I would take the train all the time, and he was like, "Oh my God, Lynda, are you okay?" And I said, "No, no, no, I'm taking the metro."
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
like, "Thank goodness you're taking the metro. Did you hear about the bomb?" Well, yeah, that's why I'm taking the metro. But yeah, that was a weird thing. It was like something inside me said, don't take the early train. So I listened to that little inner voice. And yeah, I've had a couple of times in my life where I've actually done that. I
Yeah.
wish that I would listen to my inner voice for other reasons, but that day I'm so glad that I did because the bomb went off at sort of the same time that
Wow.
my train would have been pulling into Central Station. So yeah, yeah.
So there was one thing that we did have happen. This was actually kind of, but you got to understand that at the time I was only 21,
Okay.
and um, we were
So
drunk.
only a couple of years ago then, right?
Yeah, it was last year. It was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
but we were also very drunk most of the time. So we were like on this particular trip. This was in Hawaii.
Mm,
And so we had gone to Honolulu. So this was my third time to Hawaii. So I pretty much knew the island fairly well, you know, but I hadn't really island hopped at all. So I really wanted to, we were going to go to Maui, and we had actually like booked our tickets here in Edmonton. And then, we were just going to island hop over to Maui and do like a day tour and whatever. And I had this horrible feeling, and I was just feeling like sick. Like, I don't want to go. 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 And I said, okay, I think what we're going to do is let's just not go. How about if we go to Kauai? Let's just go to Kauai. I feel like I need to go to Hawaii. Kauai. So this was in April of 1988.
wow.
And so we went to Kauai and we had a great time. It was beautiful. We had a good time. Um, Came back, and when we got to the hotel, I remember really clearly the hotel, like the staff and stuff were just looking at us like weird. I was like, what's going on? So there was four of us that went to Hawaii, but only two of us, me and my best friend, her and I, went to Kauai. The other two girls were just back at the hotel
Okay.
or whatever they did that. And so we asked if there was any messages, and they handed us, and it was like, call mom, the whole bit. And we got to our room, and our roommates were just like, holy shit, you guys are okay. Well, there was a flight. I had to look it up. I was looking on my phone because I couldn't remember the flight number. It was flight 243, and they actually made a movie out of it. But
Well,
it was, yeah, it was, we were supposed to be on, or we would have possibly been around, like it was a flight from Maui to Honolulu, you know what I mean? But it would have been like around our time that we would have been making that flight.
right.
And I just did not want to go to Maui. It was really weird. But the top flew off of the airplane.
No.
So
Oh God.
only one person was killed. That was one of the stewardesses, but the top like actually ripped off. I believe there was like 65 people.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was pretty wild because when nobody knew that we were not on that flight. So everybody assumed as soon as they heard Maui, and they just assumed. So our parents were freaking out, our roommates were freaking out, and everybody was freaking out, and we were completely oblivious to anything. Even
Wow.
at the airport, even at the airport where we landed from Kauai, nobody said a thing. Like there was nothing. Like we were right over our head. Nothing. We didn't know a damn thing until later. And then everybody was losing their shit. Hey. So
For sure.
it's like, but we were not on that flight. So yeah, but I just had this feeling. I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Now, in retrospect, looking back at it, I don't know if we would have been on that flight. I
Right.
can't say for sure. It was, one of the flights coming from like Maui back to Honolulu, I believe. I
Right.
don't know if that would have been our exact flight because when we were at the airport, I didn't bother checking flight number. I was just like, nope, we're going to see if we can switch these. And we were able to.
Jeez.
Yeah. So pretty wild. But when you think about it now, and you're like, oh my God, that was so close. Like that could have been absolutely so close. Like that, I think was more the thing. But then, it's interesting. We look at all of these, you hear these stories of like 9/11, for instance, and all these people that were sick that day.
Yes.
And there was a lot of people who should have been in that building, and you hear story after story after story about I slept in, I was sick, I didn't make the train, my car didn't work. There was a lot of people that were saved that day.
Yeah, totally. And you kind of wonder, why is that the case? I mean, especially on that day. For example, I think one of them, they forgot something at home. So they were, on the road 10, I remember reading about this, on the road for like 10, 15 minutes and thought, oh crap, I got to go back and get
Mhm.
it, whatever it was. And then turned back, went home to get it. And it's that 10 to 15 minutes that made a crucial difference.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah.
So, what do you think it is? Do you think it's divine intervention?
I do, but here's the thing. I believe in two things. You know, I do feel that spirit comes through in ways that we can never be, ever say definitively. Like I do believe that spirit absolutely comes in and intervenes in many, many aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
Okay. Whether it's redirecting or maybe it's bringing something to us or whatever it is, right? And but the other thing is too is I also feel that we as humans all are connected, and we all, it's all energy, right? We are all energy. And I do feel that to some degree there is just a collective energy that we might pick up from different sources as we're, like, for instance, for 911 or 9/11, maybe perhaps people were picking up on the different energies of the terrorists or people that were in the planes or whatever it was. Like, you know what I mean? Like they could have definitely picked up on those energies and somehow internally made a decision. Not saying everybody was like psychic, but at the same time, why not, to some degree, right? Like we are all psychic. It's just a matter of how we're using our senses.
That's really true. I mean, and there's certain frequencies that, will make you feel certain ways. And that could very well be. You don't know. You're right. There's a collective consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe that's what these people are picking up on. I mean, and I do believe
I
that,
think to some degree, like for the mass, You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some of the mass incidents. Now, that doesn't mean that spirit isn't intervening by all means.
No.
I just feel like to some degree there's a mass consciousness.
Yeah, I think that's true. And everything does happen, in my belief, for a reason. There is a reason. So
Right.
you could be really ticked off because I'm running late and my heel fell off my shoe.
Mm.
And oh my God. And it horrible. But there's a reason that these things happen. You're detained for a
Yeah.
reason.
So this is interesting. When well, I do. I feel like you just said, like, I feel like things happen for a reason. And I feel like sometimes, we're not aware of what it is, like what is the reasoning behind it. Like, it's sometimes it's not our business, to be honest.
Yeah.
We just might not know. um One of the things I remember, and I thought this was just so wild, and I'm not going to name names except for my son's, obviously, but one of his best friend was actually got into a car accident in 2022, and he was killed. So it was kind of interesting how things sort of went and happened, though. And I always found this to be okay. So when he was killed. Then my son went to school that day, like the next day. We didn't know about it yet.
Right.
My son had texted him and said, "Hey, are you coming to class?" And there was no response.
Right.
And so they had a screen in the classroom, where the principal delivers the principal message or whatever it is. They do a live. I mean, back in our day, we had the old microphone and the principal yelling.
Yep.
Nowadays, I guess it's done through like video,
Right.
right? So, but he was going on, and then he said that, that the principal was. He says we had a tragedy, and he named one of the other boys that was in the vehicle, and then all of a sudden, the video went, and my son couldn't hear, but he had already had a feeling. He was like, "Oh my God. Oh my God." So he went to his teacher and asked him, "Was the other boy blah, blah?" And the teacher went, "Oh my God, yes." And so, we dealt with that, right? And it was heartbreaking to my son. But here's the other interesting thing that happened is, so my son was supposed to have, um, uh, because he was kind of struggling with loss of focus. He was going to have, here in Canada. I don't know how it is in other parts of the world, but here in Canada, or here in Edmonton, I'm sure it's like the same where you are. If you want to get diagnosed for like ADD or anything like that, you got to go see a psychiatrist. It's through a psychiatrist, right? So he was going to go see a child psychiatrist to see if there was a diagnosis, or maybe just even to see if there was some focus, issues that were going on. And so we were supposed to go that day, the day that he had found out that his friend had died. So he would have missed that morning at school, and he wouldn't have known that you know what I mean? But they had phoned the night before and had said, or the day before, and said, "Can we move the appointment, a few days later?" Well, here's the other thing is so my son went to school that day because obviously he didn't have this appointment. And it might have been like a few days or even a weekend before he really discovered. Well, I guess he would have found out through the internet or his parents, or he would have phoned in somebody and,
Well, yeah.
discovered it. But not, you know what I mean? Like, it would have been a really bad way of finding out. But the other thing is that was the time, if any, that he really needed somebody to talk to. And who better to talk to than a child psychiatrist? And this was going to be his first appointment. And because it was only like 2 days away, it was almost like perfect timing, in that it was almost like something new, or somebody, you know what I mean? Like spirit knew that this was going to happen, and it rearranged everything in order to help my son through this trauma.
That's pretty incredible when you think about it.
Yeah. I was always like, wow, like that for me was, it's not really being saved by, but I feel like things were moved or shifted,
Yes.
because as a parent, you can obviously, you can be there for your child, and you know what I mean, but there are some things that you don't have the answers to, or you don't know. As a parent, we want to fix everything. We want to make you feel better. We want to hug you, but we might not know when it comes to a tragedy like that, how to completely deal with the tragedy, the emotions of.
Yes.
And so he had somebody right there that he was able to converse with. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just wild, how it all kind of shifted and landed. The other interesting thing is, I always found this really bizarre. So it's actually on the 27th, so that's coming up uh, on Friday. But that my mom and dad, so this was interesting. My mom and dad had both passed away my mom in October of 21, my dad in December of 21, and then my son's best friend in April of 22. So just 3 months later. But here's the weird thing. My mom and dad, their anniversary is on June 27th. My son's best friend's birthday is on June 27th.
No way.
Is that bizarre or what?
Yeah, that comes up a lot, doesn't it, Kathy, though? Like
Right? Like,
numbers. Yes.
yeah. And so again, it's not so much being saved by, or, but it is just like how everything, it always gives me those chills, because you think, yeah, yeah.
That is so bizarre. Well, okay, so here's the thing. I think we talked about this briefly online about all of this sort of divine intervention.
Mhm.
Things happen for a reason stuff. Um, you know, there's someone that I know whose family member was not feeling great. One of those things, when you're just not feeling well.
Yeah.
And she was getting some headaches, right? And kids sometimes get headaches. She's an older teenager, so she was getting some headaches. So they really didn't think anything of it, stress, school stress, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, and with the headaches, because she wore glasses, um, she was getting some funny vision things happening. So they thought, well, all right, you haven't been to the eye doctor in a while. Maybe you need new glasses. Maybe that's what's causing your headache, right?
Right.
So let's take you to, the optometrist and see what's going on. So anyway, did that. Things seemed to be okay, except for the fact that the headaches were getting worse. Migraines, really horrible, couldn't see well. So she got sent to the family doctor just to make sure that things were okay. Family doctor said, well, this is kind of odd. So obviously it's the headaches, it's the vision. Let's just, let's take you in for more tests. There happened to be an opening for an MRI. Now, when is there ever an opening for an MRI? You have to wait
Right. Months. Yeah.
months, months. And I know this, you do. There was an opening for an MRI. So they squeezed this person in. The MRI showed that there was a massive, massive tumor in her brain, which was
Oh my
obviously
God.
pressing on an optic nerve
Yeah.
of some kind. And imagine if she hadn't said anything, if somebody hadn't twigged, if there hadn't have been an opening,
Yeah.
what would have happened?
Yeah.
So
Isn't that bizarre?
I know.
It's just, it blows my mind how, things like that just seem to open up. Like it's just, I truly do feel that, spirit um has a way. And I mean, we don't know the reason. Like, why is one person saved and another one isn't? We don't know the reason for that. We can't sit there and say, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Like, we don't know.
No.
Um, maybe it was just that person's time,
Yes.
right?
True.
That, it's just that person's time. We don't know the reason behind it. I actually caught a couple of YouTube or I think they're TikTok videos of some of them. I'm gonna play one of them here. So hang on a second. I'm just trying to see. Just trying to see which one. I don't want them to be too long, but hang on a second.
That's okay. Good examples.
What's that?
They're good examples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yes.
Hang on a second. I always forget to put the I always forget to put the thing on so that I'm sharing my screen. Hang on. Okay.
I know you can do it. I have faith in you.
Well, I'm glad you have faith in me.
I do.
I'm not sure if I appreciate it. No, that's not it.
Well, and we're going to say hello, Sparky's Paranormal and Outdoors.
Hello, Sparky's Paranormal and Outdoors. All right, here we go. Hang on.
Okay, I'm ready.
Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Part 4.
In February of 1999, Maria Tejada was sitting on her living room couch just relaxing when she suddenly heard the voice of her father call out to her and tell her to stand up. Now, the thing is that Maria's father had already passed away, but for some reason, Maria felt that she should listen to what her father's voice told her to do, and so she stood up and left her living room. And just seconds later, after she left, a car crashed into her home and completely flattened the couch that she had been sitting in just a few moments before. Had it not been for her hearing her father's voice or for her standing up when she did, she may not have lived to tell this story.
Wow, hey?
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is.
Oh yeah.
There's another one here. Hang on a sec. These ones are a little bit longer though.
That's amazing though.
Right?
I love that.
But you hear about these all the time and it blows my mind. Oh, well, Sparky, we don't know where Trevor. No, actually, Trevor said he's going to try to join the show the last few minutes here. So we'll keep watch for him here. Hang on a second.
Fingers crossed.
Keep our fingers crossed.
Mm.
Play this one here. Whoops. Once again, apparently I cannot figure out. Here we go.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
This girl tells this story of when she was around 10, 11-year-old, her and her mum were in a pretty bad car accident. Now she explains her mum was far more injured than her. She luckily got away with some cuts and a few bruises. Their car was literally sandwiched between two other cars, and her and her mum had to crawl out of the back windows to get out. She remembers this man coming over to the car. He picks her up and takes her to the side of the road and sits her down on the ground. Her mum, in a bit of a daze, does see this man, but doesn't see his face. When she gets out of the car, she turns around to thank this man, but the man's gone. She tries to find him. He's nowhere to be seen. They're now sat at the side of the road, waiting for first responders to arrive. Weeks, if not a few months, go by, and they've healed from this. They're just chilling with the grandparents, with her mum's parents, looking through old photographs and just generally having a nice chit chat. This girl sees this photograph and points out the man in this picture and says, "That's him." So her mum looks at her mum, which is a nan, and is like, "Are sure?" She said, "That's the man who picked me up and put me on the ground at the side of the road. That's him." The man turned out to be her great-great-grandfather. who had obviously passed years previous. She never knew of him. She'd never obviously met him. But to this day, she still claims that that was the man who pulled her from that wreckage.
I love that.
Me too.
I do. I love that. You know, and again, we hear about family showing up in different scenarios too. And you know, we always ask like, okay, is family our spirit guides or something? And they're not really, but they are guiding, I guess is the best way to say it. They can be very guiding. They're not our spirit guides per se, but they definitely can step in instances like this
Yes.
to help or protect or whatever it is. And we hear about this a lot, especially with children when it comes to ancestors, right? Even as a paranormal investigator, we'll hear about, you know, children that are seeing relatives that have passed over. There's Mr. Trevor. Hang on a second. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I was just trying to be fashionably, 40 minutes late.
I'm just so Sparky actually has a story here, so I'm going to just pull this up for a second here. He says, I have had this as a cop responding to an accident. The victim said a man helped her out of the car, but passing motorist call said when they passed, she just got out of the car. No one else was there. That is so interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah,
interesting.
they've actually made movies that were based on stories like this. I gotta think of the name of the movie. It had Kevin Costner in it and Ashton Kutcher, and they were in the Coast Guard up by Alaska, and I can't remember what it was called, but not to give any spoiler alerts, but one of them winds up, kind of sacrificing themselves to save a group of people on a boat that had sank and stuff. And years later, the other one was, continuing on with his job and rescued some people. And they were looking around, so where's the other guy, the guy? And they're like, what are you talking about? There is nobody else. We're the last ones. No, there was a guy in the sea that was, that kept us alive, that kept helping us, and described this other Coast Guard that had given his life. It was pretty cool. So
Wow.
That's very cool. I love that. Well, like Trevor, as a person who does what you do for a living, have you heard of any, firsthand stories like this?
I haven't. No, I can't say that I have. Honestly, I haven't. Not at least none that come to memory. I haven't ran into anybody in my profession that has actually had that happen. I've heard stories from other family members that have had experiences like that, where they were going somewhere, they were supposed to go somewhere, and then all of a sudden they received a phone call that delayed them for a minute, but it was just like a random thing where, and then had they been in that spot just a few seconds earlier, than like a car would have come crashing through. Actually, I do actually remember that. This was a long time. I don't know why this popped in my head, but this was a long time ago when I was a kid. One of my friend's moms was telling us that she had a weird experience, that that for the previous night she'd had this dream that she was in a car and she had to go to the grocery store, and she pulled out onto the road and her car stalled, and she was hit broadside by a semi truck, and it was really, really bad. And so that next day she got up and she had to go to the grocery store, and she got up to the intersection and she looked over and there was a semi truck coming. So she waited and the semi truck passed, and she pulled out and the car stalled in the middle of the lane.
No.
So
No. Oh my God.
yeah, yeah, so that was, yeah. I don't know what that was. I was only a teenager when that happened, so it's funny how that just popped in my head. But yeah,
That's so freaky. You know, it's weird because when I was in publishing, I remember at one of the dinners sitting next to this girl who had obviously been in publishing way longer than me, and she was a sales rep. And she had to do the run between I think it was St. Catharines all the way through to Ottawa. And she had to do this like multiple times, once every few weeks. And this is when Paul Bernardo was making the rounds and following people and doing what he was doing. And she was terrified to break down on the side of the road, so much so that she actually broke down on the side of the road.
She created it.
She created it. It's like she said, I manifested this, right? But the strangest thing was, she said, I know you're into all this stuff, Lynda, so I have to tell you this. I broke down. It was about 8:00 at night. I was almost in Ottawa, and it was on the 401. It was a Sunday night. There was nobody around. I was terrified. And when you see somebody pull over, and this is before cell phones, right? You're at the mercy of whoever's going to pull over to help you. She had a flat. And she said, I was so dumb. I didn't know how to change a tire. I couldn't do anything. And I felt like an idiot. I should have learned this. And now I'm going to, be molested on the side of the road. And so she was really freaking out. Somebody actually pulled up behind her. This really nice gentleman got out of the car, helped her change the tire. And she said, I swear on a stack of Bibles, I said, thank you so much. I got in the car. I looked behind me in the rearview mirror. There was no car. There was no person.
Wow.
That freaked her out a little bit. So what was that, right? Was that divine intervention? Was that a spirit? I said to her, you never know. I mean, it could certainly have been. Could have been a visitation. You manifested this, but, somebody was watching out for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's hard. I mean, sometimes you wonder if it's intuition, if it's I had a personal experience. I'm like trying to refile my brain here and go through things. I did have a call where we had a young girl that got thrown from a horse enough that she seemed like she was okay, but there was something, and I couldn't tell you what it was, that was just glaring at me, and I couldn't shake this feeling that there was more to what we were seeing, and all of a sudden I don't know where it came from. I just told everybody, look, she needs to go to the trauma center. And I said, I think she's got a fractured pancreas. And everybody looked at me, and rightfully so. Everybody looked at me like, what? And even says, I don't know why. They're like, what makes you think that? I said, I'm telling you. I said, she has got a fractured pancreas, and I promise you, she's bleeding internally. She needs to go to the trauma center. I can't tell you why I know this, but I know this. And the transporting agency looked at me and they were like, okay. So because I told them, I said, what's the worst that's going to happen? You get her there and she doesn't, and you guys can say that I'm crazy and whatever. And so they didn't, and I'll be darned if they called me back and they're like, how did you know that?
Wow.
How did you figure that out? I have no idea. So it was just about the way she was presenting something about, I don't know what, but yeah. So that was, if that wasn't divine intervention, I don't know what is. So.
Wow.
I didn't even know that you could have a fractured pancreas. Quite honestly, I never even heard of that. So That's wild. That is so wild.
That is wild.
And you probably
Yeah,
just
you
felt
can,
it or heard
lacerated
it.
livers, any of those solid organs can
Mhm.
break and can get cracked open. So
Wow. That is so crazy. There we have one more story here on TikTok that I wanted to and I wanted to actually, funny enough, this is with a cop. So it's sort of along that um first responder type of and again, I forget to share my screen because I just think that you guys can see what I see all the time. And apparently it doesn't work that way. All right, here we go. Hang on.
His life was saved by a ghost. Here's the story in his own words. I used to do highway patrol as part of my duties for the sheriff's department. In the beginning of my career, I worked straight night shifts. One night just after midnight, I was passed by a car that was going well over 85 miles an hour. I threw on my lights and sped off to catch him. He pulled over to the side of the road pretty easily, and he did this thing where he turned on his dome light and rested his hands on the steering wheel. Most law enforcement officers love seeing this because then it makes their hands visible to the officer. But I just assumed he was trying to be a goody two-shoes to get out of the ticket. I typed his plate into the computer, but just the average information came up. So I figured as long as they didn't throw a tantrum, I would knock the ticket down to 75 miles an hour, which would cut the fine in half. I got out of the car, put one hand on my flashlight and the other on my gun, like I always do. As I stepped out of my cruiser, I was focused on the car I just pulled over. Just as I approached the car, I was surprised by hearing a car door slam, which made me nervous and my skin tighten up. The sound didn't come from the car I pulled over. I could see everything going on there. Then I thought another car had pulled up behind my squad. I looked, but there was nothing there. By the way, never pull up behind a squad car. You're just asking for trouble. There was no car behind my squad car, but what happened next was even weirder. The noise had actually come from the passenger door of my squad car. It was dark, so I didn't get a real good look at her, but there was a woman sitting in my passenger seat. I looked back at the car I had pulled over, and he still had his hands on his steering wheel with the dome light on. So I walked back to my squad car. The woman was wearing a highway patrol uniform, but I didn't call for any backup. Why would I? It was just a simple speeding ticket. Hello, I called out as she moved a little in the shadows, but she didn't respond back. My window was still down, so I bent over and looked in my car like I was pulling myself over. I said, "What are you doing in my vehicle?" She replied with, "He has a pistol on him." I said, "What? Who?" Again, she said, "He's got a pistol on him, next to him on the seat." I quickly opened the door to get a better look at her, but when I did, there was no one there. She had vanished. I was completely spooked, but I had a job to do. I walked back up to his car and noticed a sweater on the passenger seat, but underneath the sweater sticking out was the butt of a pistol. I convinced him to step out of the car for a few minutes, and the rest of the stop went fairly well, but I was still shook that the ghost of a woman would go through all the effort to show herself to me and warn me about this pistol. I can't help but think somehow she saved my life that night.
So I think there's a couple of holes in there. Like I would have been a little bit more freaked if I saw somebody sitting in the passenger seat of my car. But
Yeah. Just a bit.
I don't know if I would just be like, okay, see you later.
yeah,
I'm just
well,
gonna go
especially
check
police officer, right? I mean, it's like you hear that door slam. It's like, what? Yeah, that would have been like guns.
Oh yeah, you're
drawn
gonna
and,
pull
"Get out
like
of my
you're gonna.
car!" I mean, that's just weird.
Yeah,
But he is right. Don't pull up behind a police car. Okay, don't just pull up and expect to get a warm welcome because it's really abnormal. So their cops, they are on defense all the time. They're very defensive mindsets, so they're going to protect themselves. Be smart about it. If you want to go talk to a police officer, make sure you're in a well lit area. That they can see you. And if they can't see you, pull out in front of them and turn your dome light on and wave out them from the window and let them approach you. So
and do not get into the passenger side of their car.
Oh God.
don't do that. That's not a good idea either. So.
I would highly recommend it. I recommend not doing that. But yeah, I thought the story itself was interesting. I just because you do hear about first responders that do have or have had intervention by spirit, in some way or another. I remember hearing one story about like 911 call that kept going to the call center, and people would go out there and there's like nothing there. It was just,
Yeah.
but I'm sure that police and firemen, and well, maybe not you particularly, Trevor, but I'm just teasing. But I'm sure they have to deal with all kinds of junk all the time. So
Oh yeah. It's got to be a weird thing. That
Yeah.
profession in itself is hard, right?
what's that, Trevor?
For sure. It's oh well, yeah. I mean, it's a it's a different beast altogether, and what most people don't understand is that, especially in the line of police work, firefighters and where I live, it's not nearly as dangerous. But I mean, for police officers, they've constantly got to have that level. They've got to have that 360 awareness. And firefighters, first responders need to do that too, but not to that extent. And so, I know, I'm super grateful for, any divine intervention that, that I get, that doubly so for my brothers in the law enforcement community. Because, people are just so unpredictable, and you just never know. But, at the same time, being able to, pay attention to those gut feelings that you get on scenes where it's like, before, if you got a feeling like a building's about to come down on you, or something's about to explode, or, somebody has an injury that you're not seeing, that all of a sudden you're really impressed that something needs to happen here. To the point where they'll say, do, in these cases, take the patient here, or do this or do that, or at your discretion, pay attention to your gut feelings and just go it. They talk about that quite a bit, actually. So
Here's a question from Sparky. He says, Trevor, so I was a volunteer firefighter. So I'm asking, on a full-on house fire, watching the fire do the roof flame over, how many times have you seen intelligent or shapes in that fire?
I mean, yeah, the concept that fire is kind of like a living thing, right? Because if you defining what is alive, something that eats, something that grows, something that things like that, and fire actually meets that definition. It looks for oxygen. It looks for ways to survive. So it seeks. That's why it can get tricky. It'll find openings in walls and snake its way out, because it's just following airflows and things like that. I honestly haven't really encountered anything I would say was abnormal, like fire behaving abnormally, where it's like, the thing about fire is typically you can predict its behavior, and you can even control its behavior. And we've learned a lot about this over the last several years as a science in firefighting. We talk about things like flow path and what. So back in the day, you used to see firefighters breaking windows out of all the house, all the windows in the house. What we discovered is we were creating unpredictable flow paths, and so fire would do some really weird things. And so that's where I think a lot of people think, that's where that concept I think comes from, where fire is like, oh, it's like it's escaping us, or it's doing, or it's going after these people, and and it's actually more of a scientific phenomenon as opposed to intelligence, if you will. So, but I haven't really seen anything that would suggest to me that in that scenario. that fire would be anything other than just following the path of least resistance and looking for its next gulp of fresh oxygen. So
I remember, so there was one other story, and I don't know if it particularly it was like intervention or being saved by anything or not, but I always found this to be like one of those experiences that I kind of forgot about, but it was one of those experiences where you're first sort of dealing with the supernatural or paranormal or spirit or something along that line. I had a good friend that lived in Edmonton. We have little cities around us. We have lots of like little towns, I guess, attached to our city, right? And there's a city called St. Albert that's like it's literally like right beside us. You know what I mean? So a friend moved in there, and or she moved to the city, and she was living in this basement suite. She had just moved in, and so we decided we were both bartenders. We always worked really late at night, or sometimes we worked opposite shifts. So one night we actually had the night off, like at the same time, and we thought let's do a girl night, like let's watch movies and chill out and eat tons of popcorn and whatever, like let's just have a relaxing, like we need a relaxing night to ourselves. And so we did, and we had crawled into bed, and I was just about asleep, and she had this massive, I remember she had this massive bed, and I'm one of those people that I sleep like right on the edge of like a bed. I'm like, you could give me like, the bed the size of like a fucking car, and I'm going to be like on the corner or whatever. But
yeah, welcome to my world. Yeah, learned behavior from my wife who sleeps sideways in the bed.
Yeah. But it was funny because all of a sudden I felt like, so there's a lot of space like between her and I, like this big, probably could fit another 2 people in there, kind of thing. But I felt like this weird sensation like along my back, and then all of a sudden I felt it along my legs, but it felt like a kneading of a cat. Now I had just spent the entire night there, like you know what I mean, like not the whole night, but I mean like the whole evening. I was like, where's the fucking cat? Where did this cat appear from, right? And I said, Sylvia, when did you get a cat? And she leapt out of bed, like pretty much like in a state of hysteria, flicked on the light, was starting to like shaking. And I was like, what in the hell, like, what is going on? And she said, you're the first person that has like been able to validate for me that I'm not going crazy. And she goes like, there's something wrong with this place. There's something wrong with this place, because I feel that every night and it scares me. Like, she goes, I've had so many weird things happen here. And it was interesting because I feel like I remembered this because like you were talking about fire, and for some reason it reminded me, like when I was in that state, it reminded me of like maybe perhaps being in an emergency, like as if the house was on fire or something was going on. And I remember telling myself, I have to stay calm. I have to stay calm. I have to stay calm. And I remember repeating this to myself. And because I knew that if I let myself just a little bit panic, something really, really bad was going to happen.
Wow.
Like, that's how I felt. Like I have to, and I kept saying to and she's trying to get dressed and she's putting her pants on backwards. And like, she's like literally in the state of hysteria. And I'm just, all I can see, stay calm. I have to stay calm. So I'm gathering my stuff up and her stuff and all of that. And I said, okay, we'll get into my car and we'll go to my house for the rest of the night. Right. So we get into my car and we're driving, and, we're, as we're going down the road, there's this, how you like, a road that you're coming off the main road and you're turning, kind of like that. And as we're driving, all of a sudden my steering wheel just went boom, like that, just like right out of my hands. I had no control, and it just boom, and I was able to grab it back. And I didn't say a word to her because I knew that if I had said anything, she would have lost her shit. That would have been it. And I just kept going. So we're driving and we're pretty much in silence. And then all of a sudden she says, I know you didn't turn that steering wheel. And she's sitting beside me and she's just like literally like this, like just losing her mind. So we get back to my place. I get her settled into like the spare room, you know, and you're like, you're good, just sleep, you know. Next day, we go to work, we're good. That night, I get a knock on my door, and it's her. And she comes in, and she's just in a state of her. No, it wasn't that night. It was the night after. So, like, there was a night in between. And she's just in this state of hysterics or whatever. And she says, Paul knows. So this is some guy that she had just started dating, and he is from Wales. Oh. And yeah, she had just, and he was coming to the house to meet her. And she had mentioned like on one other date that they had that he had come to the house, and she's in a basement suite. So you go to the door, and then, you know, you can go in that door, and then you go down a set of stairs, and then it's like her apartment kind of thing. And so she said that he had stood outside of her apartment the entire time, like while he was waiting for her. He didn't come in, and she had invited him in. He said, no, I'm good. I'll wait for you here, and the whole bit. And so they went out and had a good time. And we had been talking about that when I spent the night at her house, right? Like she was telling me what a gentleman he was and all of this stuff. So anyway, when she shows up at my house and she's like all in tears, and she says, Paul knows. And again, she's shaking and losing her mind. And I said, what are you talking about? Like, knows what? And she goes, he knows that there's something wrong with the house. And she goes, here, I thought he was just being a gentleman by not coming in. But he came over last night because I invited him over because I didn't want to be by myself. I was scared to be by myself in the apartment. And he said, Sylvia, I'll come over, but I'm not going into your apartment. Your apartment is so fucking haunted that I want nothing to do with it. And I guess from where, you know, he is in Wales, like, you know, ghosts are like, this is a normal thing. Like, this is not something that people like lose their minds about. Like this is very, you know, he grew up in a very open family, and, you know, you could just feel the presence. And he goes, there's absolutely no way I'm ever walking into your apartment, but I will, you know, if you want, like, you know, you can come to my house, or I'll even pay for you to go to a hotel for a day or two. You know? Anyway, yeah, she ended up packing up that hotel, or that basement suite, and moving out. But for some reason, your story, Trevor, it just reminded me. It had nothing to do with being, you know, divine intervention or something. But I do feel like that steering wheel, that, you know, or even just being calm in the basement, there was just something like that kept telling me, stay calm, stay calm. And I can't just, but you know, as a kid, you know, when you're in your basement, you feel like you're going to run up the stairs.
Yes.
You have to run up the stairs. That's how I was feeling down there. Like, I have to run up the stairs. But at the same time, it was like, don't, like, it was like, you have to stay calm so you're not provoking whatever this thing is. That's how I felt. You know, and so that voice in my head, stay calm, stay calm, stay calm. And I know that wasn't coming from me, because I was not at that. I was 20, for God's sakes. I'm dramatic, right? I was a bartender. I was dramatic. Like, come on, you know. But so I wasn't one to, like, you know, stay calm. I would have put all the drama in the world on that one. But you know, but it was definitely a voice in my head that was telling me, you have to stay calm. You cannot overreact to this.
So bizarre.
It was so wild. And that was probably one of like the, you know, it was one of those experiences that, even though you don't remember it all the time, like something like Trevor had said, it just triggers, like, it, you know, it sends this memory back into you, and you're like, oh shit. It was so, yeah. But I remember laying in that bed, and I was thinking, because you could literally feel like the animal walking, you know, like I mean, my cat does this all the time, right? He rubs across my back, or he'll go to my legs and start kneading on my legs, and that's what I was feeling. I was like,
But there was no cat.
there was no cat. So I don't know what the hell was kneading on me, but it was not a putty tat.
No.
No putty tats. But that being said, thank you so much, guys, for watching our show today. We truly appreciate you guys being here, and we will see you next time. Please make sure that you subscribe, and if you have a paranormal topic for the show, contact us at paranormallyspeaking2@gmail.com, or you can just message us through our Facebook page, or message one of us privately if you wish. However you wish to contact us, we are happy to hear your story. And chances are we'll probably bring you on the show to share your story live with us. So thanks again, Trevor. I'm glad you could pop on.
Bye.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Bye, guys, and have an amazing week. And we will see you next time. Okay. Bye-bye.